The honourable member for Portage Lisgar.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure to rise today to continue, I think, what is an important question. As a proud member of the Environment Committee, we have undertaken, at the request of the government, the factors that led to the Jasper wildfire that devastated that community, leaving 2,000 people homeless, and roughly $1 billion in damages. Now, what this investigation has revealed is staggering levels of negligence or incompetence. I'm not sure what the better word to use here is. And when I asked in question period how much incompetence it takes to get fired from a Liberal cabinet, I did not get a very clear answer. So I wanted to come back for a little bit more clarity on what, in fact, it does take to get fired from this cabinet. At the time, the parliamentary secretary replied stating that the, quote, government did everything it could to prevent the wildfire, end quote. This is clearly and demonstrably false, but the Liberals simply refuse to take any responsibility, to show any humility for their possibility that maybe they could have done more, that they didn't in fact do everything they could have done. Now, the reality is, starting in 2017, the Minister of Environment at that time, Minister McKenna, began to receive letters from experts warning that Jasper was a tinderbox waiting to explode. And it was not a matter of if, it was just simply a question of when. Those individuals that know the region, know the industry, pled with the Liberal government of the day and were dismissed. Everything's in hand, don't worry, we have it. Jasper's going to be fine, everything is fine. It reminds me of what is currently happening in this Liberal government, the gift that in a burning room around you, everything is fine. It is no different in 2017 than it is now. Now, the emails of that time showed discussions that there may be political perceptions at play on whether or not they would do prescribed burns, which are an important tool that have been used for generations in this country and around the world. But the Environment Minister only cleared his department, Parks Canada, only cleared a very small, as former Prime Minister Harper, when talking about the future Liberal government's deficits, just the teeny tiniest amount of a percentage of the acres necessary to ensure that the area around Jasper would be protected. Worse, when the disaster struck, trucks were turned away. 20 trucks, 50 firefighters were turned away. And worse, when they realized after they were turned away that Parks Canada, for some reason, had bought the wrong fitting hookups, the wrong threading on the hydrants in that area that didn't align with the rest of BC and Alberta. What we've seen through this investigation is simply a failure, a refusal to accept any responsibility, any acknowledgement, and show any humility that maybe they didn't do enough. Maybe the government of the day didn't do enough. And my hope is that we might see a bit of a shift in that, because the evidence is, I think, irrefutable that the Liberal government did everything that they could to prevent this fire. So I will ask again, when will the Minister of Environment be failed for his either negligence or incompetence? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. It's disappointing that we're back here despite the fact that Jasperites have actually pleaded now with Conservative politicians to tone down the political rhetoric on the disaster which claimed 30% of Jasper and the life of 24-year-old firefighter Morgan Kitchen. But in committee and here in the House of Commons, the Conservatives have persisted to make this a political issue. And I hate to join them, but the fact is that between 2015, or before 2015, between 2010 and 2015, the Conservatives completely ignored Jasper altogether. The Stephen Harper Deficit Action Reduction Plan cut more than $30 million a year from Jasper's wildfire prevention budget. That meant that from 2010 to 2015, there was almost no mechanical thinning and very, very few prescribed burns. That $30 million cut annual cut impacted 1,600 jobs and left the park worse off. Yet in 2016, when we took power, we provided $42 million to Parks Canada, and since 2019, we've invested over $800 million. That's all incremental money because the Harper Conservatives did nothing to improve wildfire management, support provinces and territories, and train over 1,000 firefighters. But our support didn't stop there. In Budget 2021, our government committed $100 million over 5 years with Parks Canada wildland fire funding to allow critical firefighters conducting risk reduction, preparedness, and response. Mr. Speaker, our ability to control the weather or extreme weather in the face of unprecedented climate change and drying from the effects of burning fossil fuels is not absolute. We can work with various other jurisdictions, and we can do the mechanical thinning, we can do the prescribed burns, we can work with Indigenous communities like the Indigenous Leadership Initiative and the Guardians to conduct some of those prescribed burns, which has a really positive impact. But that hasn't stopped the Conservatives from amping this up and implying that this was some kind of a human error. That's not what the witnesses at committee have said, and that's not what Jasperites have asked for. But I will read a little bit of what Jasperites wrote recently in the Jasper Local, a newspaper native to Jasper. It's called Recipe for Disaster, Misinformation and Wildfire. Record dryness, extreme heat, high winds, and a lightning storm. This summer in Jasper National Park, all the ingredients for a recipe for disaster were in place. Now, 2.5 months later, that disaster came to pass, another set of circumstances. Misinformation, toxic politics, and facts-starved social media blowhards desperately looking to pin blame have lined up to wreak havoc. And I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I digress, but that is referring to the member opposite. Jasper has taken some big punches. If we're not going to get up from the mat, we first need to know that we're in each other's corner. We'll need to trust each other, we'll need to band together, and we'll need to ignore the bad actors making political hay from our crisis. July 22 had all the ingredients for an unprecedented disaster. But if we can put politics aside and filter out good information from bad, Jasper, the town and the park and all the people have all the right ingredients to make our rebuild unprecedented too. That's what our government's focused on. We're focused on fighting climate change and rebuilding Jasper. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisgar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I am frustrated by the continued effort to distract and divert from the realities. And the money and spending by the government that the Parliament Secretary mentioned is important because government should be nimble. It needs to react to, in this case, the pine beetle, the infestation, and when the actual impact of the deadwood, standing deadwood, and the fuel load that was in front of Jasper was relevant. In 2011, it wasn't. In 2014, it was. And 2017 is why warnings began then. The people of Jasper deserve answers. They deserve truth. They don't deserve excuses and diversion and try to say, oh, they're being political. Well, we are not. That is really, really frustrating. Any level of negligence in any other institution or any job, I think, would be reason for firing. This is on track with the current Liberal government. They blame everybody else for every single part. They did nothing. They did not do enough to prevent this fire. They should have done more, and I would love to hear why they didn't.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, it's a little rich coming from somebody who worked in the government with Stephen Harper when they did absolutely nothing. They did absolutely nothing to prevent wildfires. They did nothing to do mechanical thinning or prescribe burns, and that left a long hangover of inaction that our government took action on, Mr. Speaker. And if the member wants to talk, we've got a committee meeting on Monday. We can talk then. The reality is, our government undertook a mountain pine beetle strategy in 2016. That was months after we got elected. Months after we got elected, we undertook a mountain pine beetle strategy. We've invested millions of dollars into that program. We've done the prescribed burns. We've done the thinning. I want the member opposite to stop politicizing a wildfire that was started by lightning. It's absolutely disgusting. Jasperites have asked very, very clearly, cut it out. They're trying to rebuild, and they're re-traumatizing Jasperites by making this such a political issue. Read the article and cut it out.